All right, it's 1 o'clock. We are ready to roll. So hello, my name is Jayme Sellen. I am the Vice President of Economic Development and Government Affairs for the Fox Cities Regional Partnership, which is a department of the Fox Cities Chamber. Today I'm happy to welcome Secretary Caleb Frostman as our guest. Secretary Frostman was appointed by Governor Evers as Secretary of the Department of Workforce Development in January of 2019. Prior to that, he served as a state senator representing Door and Kewaunee counties, as well as the executive director of Door County Economic Development Council. Welcome, Secretary Frostman. Thank you for taking time to meet with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the chance to be here.
Wonderful. Just a few housekeeping items before we jump into our conversation. So I will kick off asking the Secretary some questions. If any of our participants on today's webinar have questions, please use the Q&A feature that is located at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll get to those questions as they pop up. It helps us kind of keep our conversation moving without the strange interactions or the challenges of meeting virtually. And then finally, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website and available for anyone to review the content and then share with others as you see fit. So let's get going, Secretary. First of all, I think the Department of Workforce Development does a lot of stuff that I don't know that everybody really knows. You know, it's a fairly substantial department. So can you give us a quick overview of what DWD does and just kind of a base level understanding for our participants today?
Sure, I'm very happy to do so. So we consider ourselves to be the state's HR experts, or kind of the HR department for the state. And we have 6 different divisions. I think when most people think DWD these days, it's around unemployment insurance, but we also are known for our work in employment and training. So one of our divisions is employment and training, which houses apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, many of the training programs that the state is known for. So that is our second largest division. Our first largest is unemployment insurance. It's about 500 people. Pre-COVID, now that we've brought on so many vendors and new staff, if you include all the new hires and the vendors, UI is just short of 2,000 people. We also are the state's workers' comp administrator, so we have a division entirely dedicated to workers' compensation. We also have a division for equal rights, which is your workplace discrimination complaints, as well as fair housing. That is our smallest division. We have a division specifically for vocational rehab, which works to help people with disabilities find a job. 300 folks. And then we have an entire division that is just for operation of the entire agency. So pre-COVID, we were about 1,400 to 1,600 people. With all of the additions to UI as a result of COVID, if you include our vendors, we're closer to 3,000. But generally speaking, we've had a stable employment level of about 1,400 to 1,600 folks, and have specialized in those 6 areas for some time.
Great, thank you. So this webinar is entitled A Workforce Recovery Conversation. So let's kind of head into that. I think we probably need to start with the general landscape of the workforce. So unemployment, where are we at? Like I haven't seen the latest numbers, but somewhere around 7% unemployment.
Yep. So I was just telling the admins before the start of this webinar that we're using visuals now. We were just giving verbal updates on a lot of things, but I think some of these pictures are a really helpful illustration of where we've been. But I'll just start by saying that in March in Wisconsin, we were at about 3.3% unemployment, and by April we were north of 13% unemployment. So it really was an unprecedented increase. And I'll just share some of these quick. ABC did a news story a couple weeks ago about the unprecedented nature of the COVID-19 economic realities, and I'll share that. Oops, that probably didn't work. Did that work or not?
I don't see it.
No, that's okay. I'm for an elder millennial, I'm somewhat technologically challenged, so I will share screen, go here, and there we go. Hopefully that worked. Okay, so we don't need this intro slide, but I will share the next one. So this next slide really shows the increase that hit in March. So our previous record in the US for new claims in 1 week was about 690,000 back in the 82 recession. In week 2 of COVID, we had 6.9 million. So we beat our previous record tenfold. You can see the previous record line as well as unemployment as it relates to the Great Recession over those dates and a bit of the dot-com piece. So really crazy visuals and crazy numbers for unemployment. That story also pointed out that although that previous record was 695,000, for 20 straight weeks, the U.S. was north of 1 million new filings. So we beat that record not only tenfold in week 2, but kept that going for 20 straight weeks. That was just recently stopped, and then last week we had more than 1 million nationwide again. Here's just a quick little picture of Wisconsin. Our previous record was actually the dot-com crash as far as our records go, but you can see we more than doubled that in April for new claims. Just a quick glimpse of COVID-19 versus 82 for the course of 33 weeks, COVID versus the Great Recession. And then here's just an illustration of what our first 33 weeks of 2020 looked like compared to the first 33 weeks of the Great Recession. Again, just unprecedented numbers as far as volume. These are initial claims. The next one is weekly claims, so your recurring claims, folks that are on UI looking for employment. Really pretty crazy numbers. And then this just shows in 5 months, so from March 15th to about August 15th, we had 853,000 initial claims compared to south of 290,000 in all of 2019. So pretty incredible difference in claims year-over-year. Very similar on the recurring claims. We have a much higher number than this now. I think it's closer to 6 million with our most updated numbers, but again, compared to 1.6 in all of 2019. So that's just a brief look at the volume of claims in 2020 versus 2019. But to deal with that and to address those claims, to onboard federal programs, and to do all that work, we had to hire people, and a lot of them. And so over the course of a couple of months, between new hires, bringing on vendors, and some intergovernmental transfers, we were able to nearly quadruple our staff from 500 folks in UI to a peak of about 1950 in July, and added many more adjudicators, more folks in our call centers. But it's been obviously a pretty large lift for us, and we are really encouraged to see the overall numbers continue to decline in Wisconsin, that folks are going back to work. That 7% number, we got a long ways to go. Wisconsin's still down about 216,000 private sector jobs year over year, but we'll take the good news that we can get. And so if we can continue that positive trend, I think that'll help us catch up on our caseload, but also help Wisconsinites catch up on investing in their communities, investing in their homes, and carrying on as normal as we can possibly be in these times.
Great.
So in a nutshell, that's where UI is at. Yep.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Since we're on the UI topic, President Trump signed the executive order that would provide an additional $400, but not really $400. It was like $300 from the federals, and then the states had the option of adding another $100. Where are we with that? Because I know some states can do it, but I don't believe currently in Wisconsin that we are part of that $300 to $400.
Sure. So as of yesterday, 30 states had applied and been approved for either the 300 or the 400. We are in the final throes of running our traps on our end. The application, if states move forward, is due September 10th. So obviously, if we move forward, we want to do that long before then to make sure that if we are approved, we get the 3-week allocation. So I think it's reasonable to expect a decision here in the next couple of days. Next, as far as if we're going to apply, and hopefully thus far FEMA has been very, I think most folks have been approved if they apply, and so we're hopeful if we move forward that we would be approved and we'd be able to move forward quickly. And it's challenging if that goes forward, and if we're approved, that's another instance where I didn't talk about it in our update, but one of the things that's kind of hamstrung us has been this antiquated IT mainframe system. So if that were to be implemented, it would take some time to program, but our folks would still, if we're approved, be able to provide some of that relief going back to August 1st. So
is there a need for a legislative change or anything like that in order to apply or to put the extra $100 in, or is that all done administratively?
So most states, 28 of the 30 that have gone forward have just done 300. I think that extra 100 is really problematic for a lot of states, so whether they have coronavirus funds left or what that looks like, because you're not allowed to use trust fund dollars for that extra $100 payment. So that creates a pretty severe administrative burden on most states, as only 1 out of 15 are doing the 400. So at this point, if states move forward with 300, and if Wisconsin moves forward, we don't anticipate any required legislation for the 300. If the 400 is the case, there might be more investigation that's needed, but most of those states that have moved forward have chosen the 300, I think, due to that administrative burden of finding the extra $100 and making that work.
We do have a question in from our chat, which is, the question is, why hasn't Wisconsin applied yet? Or rather, what was the hesitation, or is the hesitation for applying for that FEMA extra dollars?
Sure, I think it's just being extra thorough. I mean, there's a lot of trying to understand. I think when it first got announced on that Saturday, there were way more questions than answers as far as what that program looked like. It's unprecedented to have a mandate come through an executive order for funding supplemental unemployment benefits. So digging into the FEMA guidance, which was a little bit slow in coming, as well as some of the DOL guidance, I think we've digested most of that. And so just making sure we've got all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. There are also a lot of questions on liability. If the dollars run out, who's on the hook and who's liable for what? So there was a lot of investigation and research needed to happen to make sure there's a comfort level moving forward to make sure that we're protected if the dollars run out. If there are, the appeals situations are a little bit, challenging as far as there's no law on the books federally guiding something like this other than the EO. So just making sure we have all of our ducks in a row before, potentially obligating the state something that might be challenging based on the guidance that's out there. But I think in the last few days and weeks, FEMA and DOL have accelerated their guidance, and we've gotten greater clarity that we've been looking for in the beginning. So, yeah,
that's very understandable. Another question from our chat, from our audience, is, we at Valid Packaging Industries and a number of our local nonprofit partners are self-insured for our unemployment insurance. We are thankful that the state of Wisconsin has passed legislation and not required 50% of that reimbursement payment, but we are still being required to pay the other 50%, the federal portion. Do you know when the feds are planning on reimbursing the state so that you will be able to pass on that reimbursement to make organizations like ours whole?
So this is a common point of discussion around the state, and I think we're very fortunate to have such a strong nonprofit sector in Wisconsin, but obviously those organizations run on shoestring budgets and on really narrow margins. And so we continue to press both statewide and nationally for relief in that aspect to help our nonprofits that have had to essentially pay that 50%. And so I don't have a good time frame or a good answer specifically, but know that there's continued pressure from this administration, from DWD, to get that clarity and get that resolved, because we get a lot of phone calls from folks about that, and for good reason, because the YMCAs of the world, the Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Clubs, they don't have cash coming in out of their over and their expenses, and so it's just really challenging for those folks to make it month over month without that reimbursement.
For sure. My last question on unemployment, and then we can obviously move on to other issues dealing with DWD, but a number of our members have alerted us to mailings that they've received stating that they've need more information, or they've been approved for unemployment insurance when they haven't applied. My question is, what do you do if you get one of these letters? Obviously, I believe they're fraudulent, but I mean, who do we alert, and how do we get the, because there's a lot of scams, there's a lot of things going out there, unfortunately, right now, and how do we prevent that, or, move on from those?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously really alarming with the onset of COVID. This is really similar to what we saw in the Great Recession, when there's great upset in the economy, and more folks are applying for either unemployment insurance or federal programs like PUA. A lot of thieves and identity thieves are active, and we've seen that in other states and in Wisconsin. So if you get that letter, if you think of fraudulent claims been filed in your name, you can go to dwd.wisconsin.gov/UI/fraud, or you can call our unemployment fraud line at 909-9472. But with some of the like the Equifax breach and a few other breaches that have happened in the last few years, we've seen a really drastic increase in attempted fraud. I think we've been really grateful that Wisconsin has pretty strong anti-fraud measures in place, but that certainly doesn't stop the heartburn or the incredible anxiety when you receive something like that. So please, and I can put that in the chat afterwards, the phone number and the website, but follow up with us as fast as you can, and we'll work to remedy that situation.
Great, yeah, because that was one of those things that we weren't really sure how to advise our members. So I appreciate that you have resources for anyone to go out there and report these fraudulent letters. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, going back to the whole point of this, workforce recovery conversation. What does recovery look like from your standpoint for the workforce?
Sure. Well, I think I'm grateful to our sister agency at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. They put forward a great list of kind of reopening guidelines, but those are based on the priority of getting COVID under control. And until COVID-19 is contained, or there's a vaccine, or it's eradicated, it's going to be really challenging to return to quote unquote normal in Wisconsin's economy. So we've been emphasizing first and foremost the continued practices of hand washing, mask wearing, distancing, those kind of things, to make sure that we can do all that we can to contain and eradicate COVID-19. But for us, beyond that, once that happens, it's working with groups like chambers and employers around the state to hopefully, I think lean into our existing programming, but also look to those groups to help us innovate. And it was, before COVID, it was still apparent, but it's been exaggerated now. Some of those fault lines in our economy along, racial lines and other inequities, and some of the challenges we have in access to broadband, childcare, healthcare, those have all been exacerbated and exposed as a result of COVID-19. So we are really looking at DWD and through Governor Evers to have an equitable, inclusive recovery, but we really are planning on leaning into and hopefully innovating our already effective programs, things like Wisconsin Fast Forward. That's a pretty flexible program that's employer-led, but we're hoping to deliver industry recognized in-demand credentials for those workers that also help that business, but also can help lift an entire industry. And so we just put out $2.5 million through Fast Forward at the end of June, and we're hopeful to put out another GPA this fall, hopefully in October, to get more training dollars out the door. I think we were really grateful to see the appetite and the interest for additional training, even in these challenging times, and whether it's the Wausau Chamber today. I'm not sure if Fox Cities is the same way, but WMC, even with unemployment around 7%, we're still hearing from employers that they're having a challenging time finding folks. So to the extent that our programming can help either get folks that are unemployed employed, or to help incumbent workers achieve better outcomes, get a more advanced skill set, and therefore hopefully get better wages, we really want to take the comprehensive look, and then also lean in heavily into apprenticeship programming. And we've worked pretty hard pre-COVID, and again, COVID has just made it that much more urgent to really expand apprenticeship in every direction, in the sense of new industries, geography, but then also reaching new populations, at least from the RA side, the adult registered apprenticeship side. We've been challenged to have representation among apprentices, among women and persons of color, and so we're really excited to have just gotten a $9 million federal grant to expand apprenticeship in all of those areas. And so we're hopeful that we can do that. And I think the reason that we're so bullish on a program like apprenticeship is its unique ability to allow someone to work, in most cases, in a living wage job while being trained and while learning an in-demand transferable skill, a credential that follows you the rest of your life. A lot of other training methods might require folks to leave the workforce or to perhaps accumulate debt in order to get a credential. And so all we can do to encourage folks to employers or job seekers consider apprenticeship as an option, we're going to do that. So I think we're excited that our suite of offerings, I think, can lend themselves to that equitable, inclusive recovery. But I also am wide open and fully aware that I'm sure our suite of services are not totally comprehensive, and will likely have to innovate and certainly take input and take feedback to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of offerings that our employers and our job seekers in Wisconsin need.
So you brought up several things that I kind of want to dive into a little bit more. But one of the things was, as you mentioned, despite having a higher unemployment, we still have quite a few job openings. I think you mentioned it in Wausau. It's definitely the case here as well. What can employers do to connect with the unemployed or underemployed, quite honestly, because there's underemployed that could be doing more. They just maybe their hours got cut back. So what from the employer standpoint, how can we interact with DWD to get to find those unemployed or underemployed?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up both populations too, because we've had a strong focus on the quantity of jobs in Wisconsin, helping job seekers fill those open jobs and employers, but also on the quality of those jobs. So if someone is underemployed or it's just missing a certain trainable skill set or a credential, we want to help that person advance, because obviously economic advancement happens when we fill open jobs, but it also happens when people working have additional income to invest in their communities, in their families. And so we've taken kind of that belt and suspenders approach. But one of the ways that we've been trying to help employers connect with at least job seekers, but perhaps underemployed folks as well, is through our jobcenterwisconsin.com website. So that's a free labor exchange for both job seekers and for employers. And as of this week, there were, I think, 72,000 job openings and I think about 125,000 resumes on that website. Now that peaked in traffic in June, so unemployment insurance claimants are required to register on what we would call JCW. So that's a great place to find folks that have been displaced or dislocated. And again, the 72,000 job openings is pretty incredible for job seekers too. But I would really encourage employers to utilize that service. It's searchable by geography, by military status. So it's really meant to be a really comprehensive. We're still deciding which businesses were essential or quote unquote not essential. We put together an in-demand jobs page specifically for those employers that were still open. And that got a fair amount of traffic. It's still available on JCW, but I would encourage employers, if you're not using that already, to use that to access that really large pool of tens of thousands of Wisconsinites that were recently dislocated or could currently be underemployed, as a free access point to what could be a really talented pool of folks.
So the website is a great resource. It has phenomenal information contained into it. One of the things that COVID has brought to our attention, even more so, is the importance of broadband and having access to internet. And even in rural, some urban areas don't have great access to the internet. In this area, we're pretty good, but there's rural parts of our territory as well that may not have that access. So typically somebody would go to one of your job centers and use the computers and the staff there, and really kind of work with your business service teams. What now, because I believe the job centers are still closed, how can individuals who are unemployed that may not have access to the internet, how can they interact with your team and seek opportunities of employment?
Sure, and you are spot on. I mean, it's been, I think, interesting on both fronts. We've been really pleased, I think, with how our virtual service delivery has gone for those that have access to a computer and those that have access to the internet, just based on anecdotal feedback. I think we've been really pleased how that's gone, and I think we've learned a lot and implemented innovation in that sense, but it's also been really revealing as to how many people in Wisconsin don't have access either to the internet or a computer, or are not necessarily very computer savvy. So we've been trying to be creative. So we do job service by phone, which can be challenging. If you need the internet to find the phone number, that can be a challenge, but hopefully we've been able to make some of those connections. But something else that's just been starting in the last few weeks have been our drive-through job fairs in partnership with Workforce Development Boards. So again, not necessarily perfect from a distancing standpoint, but much safer than having a lot of folks in one location at one time. But I think, again, with the first couple of those, we've been very pleased with how they've gone. We'll continue to do those going forward in partnership with the Workforce Development Association. And then I think you'll also likely see us redeploy our mobile career lab. That was something we delivered last year. It's kind of a first of its kind in the state. And we had it on the sidelines a bit with COVID, but it does have outdoor screen capabilities. It has the ability to deliver some of those services with proper distancing, with proper cleaning, with proper ventilation. So I think it's really likely that we are going to see the redeployment of that mobile career lab here in the next few weeks before the snow flies too much and outdoor opportunities are still a reality in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think so. We had a drive-through career fair in our area, and it was really successful. In fact, we're going to be doing another one in partnership with the Workforce Development Board, and have 2 locations. I think one's in Menasha, and I think the other one's in Fond du Lac. But that, I think, has been, a great opportunity. And that mobile job center, we've been talking about it in the chamber of how do we get that thing up here and when can we use it. And I think the pandemic has really made that tool even more important. So we look forward to working with you to bring that up to our area and start utilizing that a little bit more. We also kind of touched on Wisconsin Fast Forward, and I think that is a great program. And I know in the first couple of years, they didn't expend all the dollars. Maybe it wasn't maybe not as well known. But if any employers looking to retrain their employees, it's a great opportunity. So can you just talk about Wisconsin Fast Forward a little bit and how that program works?
Sure. We generally do, it seems like, multiple offerings per year, but it's meant to be employer-led training. So we generally take, sometimes there are different partners and kind of a consortia effort, but it could also be just private employers looking to train employees. But it is meant to be more flexible. I think the grants can be up to $400,000 in a multitude of industries. And really, trying to help solve those workforce problems, help provide the credential necessary to step into a role, or to help folks that are perhaps chronically unemployed get that first step in the door. And also, if there's an opportunity for existing employees to get that new skill set that advances them within the workplace, we want to help that happen too. And so it's interesting. It's really meant to be that flexible, creative type of program. I know we've worked very hard over the last number of years to cut some of the red tape, the feedback that we get, and it seems to be improving, but I'm sure it's still not perfect. But some of the feedback is that it's a challenging application process, especially for small businesses, a grants manager. And so we're cognizant of that and trying to make that a more applicant-friendly process. But it really is an opportunity to fund $40,000 in training, $30,000 up to $400,000 in opportunities for employers to take advantage of some state resources in that, providing advancement for unemployed folks or their current workers. But again, it's kind of a dual purpose. We'd like to see those employees and those trainees get skills that are transferable within an industry, so not necessarily just specific to one employer, but it really can be that flexible, hopefully creative solution for a lot of employers that are looking to have co-investment from the state as far as training goes.
So I was slightly negligent in my hosting responsibilities, and I didn't check the chat before I asked you that last question. So if you wouldn't mind, can we quickly go back to the mobile lab? We have a question in here: is who's responsible for staffing the mobile lab? So if it comes up to the area, who staffs it?
So thus far, our team has been staffing it, and I'm not sure if we've had other Workforce Development Board folks help us, but at this point, it's been our staff. I'm sure we're open to having other folks, whether it's the development boards or job center staff, be involved. But it's been our team driving it around the state, and I think it's kind of disheartening. We're also excited in the fall to really just do months and years worth of traveling Wisconsin and helping develop the workforce. And COVID kind of hit the brakes on that, pun intended. But we're hopeful to see greater usage of that going forward. And generally speaking, it's been our Madison employment and training staff that's been staffing that.
And then we have just another comment going back to the fast forward funds is the Fox Valley Workforce Development Board has worked with many local companies to secure Wisconsin fast forward funds. So if you have questions, I'm sure the folks at the Fox Valley Workforce Development Board would be happy to talk with any of our businesses in this area. So, okay, other than work with the Fast Forward program, are there other training opportunities that DWD provides for employers specifically?
For employers specifically, I mean, the apprenticeship programs, again, we're really big on those, and then we're always looking for grant opportunities from the federal level. We just put forth a $15 million grant for employment training recovery. Obviously not counting our chicks for the hatch, but we're hopeful to get that, which might be helpful for employers. But those are generally speaking, our greatest opportunities for training. And we do have, and we hope not to use these teams more than we have to, but when there's a large dislocation, our rapid response teams work in conjunction with development boards, as well as other local partners, and helping those dislocated workers connect with local employers. And so you've seen that at Verso in Wisconsin Rapids, Milwaukee at Potawatomi. Those teams are very talented. Like I said, the less we deploy them, the better as far as economic indicators go. But we're really pleased to have such talented folks working on helping dislocated workers when that's necessary.
Great. You talked about apprenticeship, and we've had this conversation. I'm a big fan of youth apprenticeship. And we have school districts that have a variety of plans of coming back to school. How is that going to impact youth apprenticeship? Because a component of your youth apprenticeship is you go to your high school for part of the day, you go to post-secondary for part of the day, and then you go to a job. So how is that going to be impacted due to all the restrictions from COVID-19?
So it probably will. So I think there's, we're looking at this. We learned some things from the spring, and we're obviously going to be learning some things this fall. But I think we're both concerned and optimistic in the sense that, there's going to be new realities for working remotely, for instruction remotely at some of the high schools, some of the secondary schools. But we're also somewhat optimistic that some of those students might have greater flexibility in their schedule that they wouldn't have had otherwise pre-COVID at their schools and their instruction, and some of even the work could be done on a more flexible schedule. So we did see a really strong interest in youth apprenticeship this year. We funded just under $5 million in YA grants. We're expecting just under 6,000 students enrolled in YA, which is a little bit less than last year. Of course, we would love to have seen an increase, but with COVID, I just don't know if that was a reality. We've got 37 consortia around the state and about 400 school districts participating. So one of the, I think, advantages that Wisconsin has is that YA is run locally. So with the different consortia, they can take direction from the state and they can implement the program and run it as the state requires, but there's a lot of flexibility in how local consortia run their YA. So I think it's going to be based on the employer, based on the educational institution of high school or the tech college, but we'll see what 2020, 2021 holds for YA. But I know we're optimistic, yet obviously there's a lot of question marks out there for a lot of folks. But I think just based on the enrollment side and talking to our consortia, we feel pretty good about an otherwise pretty uncertain school year ahead.
Yeah, and the program is so important for those students because it really does give them a step up in their adult life, and they get to try a job on before they go down that path to education and employment. And I think it's one of the best programs I think that the state has for helping individuals figure out their path in life. So as I've told you, I'm a big fan of the program, and I've seen a lot of kids that didn't know what they wanted to do really benefit from youth apprenticeship. So I hope it keeps on moving forward as planned. So we have a lot of businesses that are, they've taken advantage of different federal financial aid programs, whether it was the PPP or EIDL loans or things of that nature. Do you know if there's going to be any federal response to workforce funds becoming available?
So outside of the executive order from President Trump and the grant that we applied for, the $15 million for economic training recovery, we're not aware of anything, and it's obviously really challenging, with the inaction in DC, that there's not a whole lot of movement there. So that's been challenging to see that not move forward. But we're not aware of anything beyond the grant we put forward and the executive order. But we'll continue to obviously go after the grants that make sense for Wisconsin, and if there's a way for us to invest in our workforce with federal dollars, we're going to pursue those. And so we're hopeful that if there is additional funding coming, that Wisconsin's successful in application, that it comes sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any questions, I just remind you that you can use the Q&A or chat feature, and I'll read your questions up, and I promise not to miss them like I did a little while ago. I think my last question for you, or really not a question, just a topic for you to discuss, is the WorkShare program. I know that it probably hasn't been utilized a lot, but I think that during COVID, I know a lot of businesses had utilized it and kept their employees, on their insurance and their benefits, but were able to get, keep those employees engaged, but not, not to the extent that they did pre-COVID. So can you talk about WorkShare and that program?
Yes, that's been one of I think a success story of the COVID situation, at least as it relates to workforce. WorkShare is a program that allows employers to reduce staffing hours, and those folks, of course, get pro rata wages, but they do stay attached to their benefits, and then they are also eligible for partial unemployment insurance. So it, in many cases, almost makes that employee whole, while the employer can cut down on costs if there's reduced demand. But they keep those employees attached to their jobs. They're still producing at some level for the goods and services that their communities need. And then those employees are able to continue supporting their local economy. And so there was a couple of new laws passed this spring to help expand WorkShare. And one of which was, I think previously it required the greater of 20 employees or 10% of your staff. Now you can go do as few as 2 if you'd like. Previously was you could do as few as 10% of the hour reduction up to 50. Now you can do up to 60. And then at the end of the year, all of the WorkShare benefits that are paid are going to be paid with federal dollars. So that's another attractive piece for folks to use WorkShare. We are working on putting a marketing piece together. So if folks are interested right now, our website has all the information. It's just not very pretty yet, but dwd.wisconsin.gov/UITax/WorkShare. But we're very close to finishing our marketing piece that we'll send around. But you are right, prior to COVID, we had one plan on the books with about 20 employees, and we peaked in July with just under 700 plans and about 23,000 employees on WorkShare. And it stays, we're still in the 500 range with about 17,000 employees on WorkShare, but that's a lot of people in Wisconsin that are still attached to their healthcare, that are as close to being made whole as they can be in order to continue paying bills, to continue buying groceries, and also employees that are still producing for those employers and putting goods and services out for the community. So it's really been a strong win-win-win, and we continue to evangelize the benefits of WorkShare and are hopeful that folks will continue to use it. So if anyone's on this call considering layoffs or work with companies that are, we would highly encourage you to at least take a look at WorkShare before moving forward with a full or permanent layoff of staff.
Great. Yeah, I think that's those changes have been really helpful during this time. So we appreciate that. My last question is something that I've asked of WEDC and our legislators in the past is, all right, let's get out the crystal ball. What is your prediction? What do you think, how long until we workforce is back, unemployment numbers are, lower and our economy's back to where we started pre-COVID?
That's a really tough question. I think we're feeling better these last few days and even the last week or so on some of the COVID trends. I know those were on a troubling trend for a few weeks. I know we were seeing 1,000 new cases a day for a while there, which was really challenging. And we're hopeful that the trend in unemployment rate in Wisconsin continues down. I think if employers are able to find a safe way to keep folks employed, that's really exciting. And I think we're hopeful and optimistic that stays the case. Being short 216,000 jobs from where we were a year ago, that's going to be hard to keep adding those back. I think this last month we added 30,000 back to the payroll. So, that would be 7 months from now. And it's also challenging in Wisconsin when we look at, historical graphs of unemployment. We are a very seasonal state based on our weather patterns. So we're actually heading into the most challenging part of any calendar year for Wisconsin UI, even without COVID. So that would likely, prolong any type of, straight line recovery. So it's challenging to say. I think once COVID is under control, I think there is, pent up demand. And I know we've heard different things along the way. Initially, it's going to be a V-shaped recovery, and then that's definitely not going to be the case. And then we heard, how many restaurants and how many other businesses of all sorts of kinds are perhaps permanently closed. And so I think as we move forward here, if we can continue to see strong containment of COVID-19, strong private sector job growth, I think it's possible. I know my friends at DOR do a lot of projections and predictions. Secretary Barca might be willing to be a little bit more definite in his projections and his predictions, but I think we're hopeful that in 2021 we're at least back in a place of semi-normalcy that feels like where we were at least the few years before COVID, in a more stable, quote unquote, normal economic environment for all of us.
Well, I thank you for your prediction, and I hope that it comes true. This is the part where I ask you, did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you'd like to address that we haven't hit on so far?
I don't think so. I appreciate the question on work share. That's something that we just really want to keep hammering home for businesses and chambers. That's something we'd like to see utilization of, especially with the federal benefits being paid out of that program. It's really, again, like a win-win-win for the employee, the employer, and that local community. But otherwise, I think we had a pretty far-reaching, comprehensive conversation, and really appreciate the invitation to be here today and the great conversation.
So yeah, likewise, we certainly appreciate the partnership that we have with you, Secretary Frostman, and appreciate your willingness to take the time and talk about all these programs and answer all my questions and our participants' questions. So I wish you well, and thank you so very much.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
All right, take care.